Crisis after crisis exploding in Ukraine, in Israel, and right here at home at the U.S. border, and now expanding across the nation. So where is President Obama in the middle of all of this? Jumping on Air Force One and fundraiser hopping. Former Congressman Alan West takes the president to task in just minutes, but first, more grim news for President Obama, a giant legal setback for Obamacare.
Huge day for the rule of law here.
This is a big blow to Obamacare.
This decision ultimately could gut and really cut the heart out of Obamacare.
If this ruling stays in place, it would essentially obliterate Obamacare.
All of the people that got subsidies at healthcare.gov are essentially in violation of the law.
Going forward, it's going to be chaos.
And for the latest on today's court ruling and the other court ruling, Fox News correspondent Shannon Bream joins us. Shannon, what happened today?
Greta, it's been a busy day. In the morning, a bad deal for the administration. Essentially, this federal court, one step below the Supreme Court here in D.C., said, we're not going to allow you to expand all these subsidies that help fund millions of people in 36 different states, where the law, the plain language of it, according to this court, doesn't say you can do that. It was an IRS regulation that was making that possible. Well, fast forward just a couple of hours later, we got a ruling from an equal federal circuit court, the Fourth Circuit, based in Richmond, saying actually the administration can do this. They deferred to the IRS for interpreting this rule, saying, yes, these subsidies can go forward. Now, without them, there are big problems. It really undermines the law in a lot of ways. But now we have this split, so now we wait to see if we end up at the Supreme Court. There are steps that can happen in between, but for right now, those subsidies are going to continue. All
right, so the Supreme Court, since it's a conflict in circuits, it's almost an invitation to go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will take it. However, the Supreme Court's on vacation. There is that.
They are for now.
And until October. Yep. And then they would decide in October whether to take it. And so when would this likely be decided?
Well, you know, you need 4 votes, 4 justices to say we're willing to wade into this thing. So, I mean, it could conceivably be heard in the next term, which, you know, runs October to June of then 2015. But in the meantime, there could be something that happens in which either of these circuits, the losing party can ask for the full circuit of judges, all of them in that circuit, to rehear the case and issue another decision. If so, that's another stop before you get to the Supreme Court.
Okay, so the impact on someone sitting at home who's got health insurance tonight or Obamacare insurance to the state is thinking what? Or should be thinking what?
If you're getting a subsidy, for now that's going to stay in place. In the next round of enrollment,
if
those will still...
But the state.
Right.
If you went federal.
Well, I mean, under those federal exchanges, you know, you should be getting the subsidy anyway. That's what the plain language of the law says. So either way, you're going to continue to get your subsidy for now while this is all ironed out. But the interesting thing is that even those who support Obamacare say if these subsidies go away, the policies become much more expensive. And then those individuals could argue, hey, there's a hardship. I can't do it. It's my way out of the individual mandate. And that could happen millions of times over.
Yikes.
Would undermine Obamacare big time. 90% of people on those federal exchanges are subsidized. 4.7 million people could face increases in premiums of 90%, or excuse me, 76%. So it could be huge. However, go 100 miles south and you go to Richmond, and that circuit court said, no, no, no. We're not talking about the plain language in the statute, which is what the D.C. Circuit relied on. We have to go back and look at what Obama said and what Congress said about this health care law when they passed it. And they did not intend to have 2 classes of citizens. You know, you don't get a subsidy if you're one class, and you do get a subsidy if you're another class, and said this is just about people trying to undermine this law. So these are very, very opposite views of what that law says.
You know, though, who the really rotten ones in this, I think, are? It's Congress. And I think it's the Democrats who voted for Obamacare. The reason we have this problem is because they didn't bother to read what they voted for. Yeah. Because the law hasn't changed. This is the very law they all voted on. So now they got this mess, just like with the medical device tax. If they bothered to read anything, so woe is me to the poor Democrats who blew this by not even bothering to read it.
Well, look, this couldn't be a bigger PR coup for Republicans. A central theme that they've been hammering going into this election cycle is that Democrats are incompetent and they're not good at governing. And this gives them a chance
they're not good at reading. They're not good at reading. That's weird.
As much as I like to say this is a roadblock to Obamacare, it's really going to amount to a speed bump. That basically they're going to go to the Court of Appeals and they might as well just establish a drive-through because they're going to go straight through the Supreme Court. They're going to give the administration whatever they want. And then
no. Where do you think that? Why do you think that? You know, it's the Supreme Court, as Nina just said, the Supreme Court may look at the plain language and not feel like you do. They know the Supreme Court is not supposed to legislate.
John Roberts had one chance to get rid of Obamacare already, and he didn't take it. Unlikely he's going to be one honest man.
There's another really important speed bump here, though, and Shannon referred to that.
Speed bump or roadblock?
Well, a roadblock to stopping Obamacare is that if the administration goes to the D.C. Circuit and asks for what's called an en banc hearing, which is all of the justices have to weigh in on it, that's 7 of those are Democrat appointees and only 4 are Republican appointees. That could block that case right there.
But there's nothing. So, even if they lose, they can still go to the Supreme Court. It makes it a less attractive path for them, but they still can go to the Supreme Court.
But it is something that they've got. It's another hump to get past. So I think there's a lot. There's other steps to be had before you get to the Supreme Court.
Are you as Paul with the Democrats who are now moaning about this when they didn't bother to read it, and this has been in the statute since the beginning?
I think it's certainly fair to have that response. And the big picture here is that it's just a pain. It's a pain for Democrats who have to keep defending this, who have to get in the wonky weeds, and it distracts them from whatever their big picture argument is.
It's also a pain for the American people who want some level of stability and certainty. And there is none of that. Whichever way you fall on this, at least you want certainty.
You're not supposed to legislate through, you know what we mean. The gist of it is in the legislation.
Well, you know what Leader Pelosi, then Speaker Pelosi said, is that we need to pass it so we know what's in it. Well, now they're getting a little taste of their medicine. It's like, look, I find it appalling that members of Congress, and it's one thing to vote on the name for a post office and not read it, but something that changed, America so much.
1/7 of the economy.
Yeah, whether you're for it or against. Anyway, panel, stay with us and develop.